Doula, a tale of survival. I love my job, but it's getting more difficult as hospitals close or as they shutter their maternity wards. It means long drives and nights out in the rural areas. Eastern Washington state is huge. It's a 3-hour drive to tiny Garfield County from my home in Yakima. Cell service is sketchy or non-existent in places. Tonight I got a call from a rancher in a very rural area. His wife was comfortable and progressing steadily, so I bundled into the car, despite the snow. These long drives push me into introspection. I think about successful deliveries with healthy mothers and babies, and I think about the 2 that I've lost in my 20 years. Those 2 always live in my mind, mother and child. I still had nightmares. 3 hours later, I knew I was lost. The phone was no help and kept steering me back to the interstate even though the ranch house was at least 20 miles off the highway. I peered through the blowing snow, desperately looking for road signs or landmarks. As I crept along, a herd of cattle materialized on the icy road, and I slammed on the brakes to avoid crashing into 30,000 pounds of bovine stupidity. The car skidded out of control, and suddenly I found myself upside down off the roadside. The car must have rolled. I was dangling in my seatbelt, and my now cold coffee was dripping down my face. I panicked. Phone. Where's my phone? How long had I been here? The car ticked as it cooled, and my breath fogged from my mouth as I struggled to unsnap the seatbelt. It wouldn't budge. I was stuck and getting cold. A cow peered in at me, its wet nose shining in the icy moonlight. Finally, I spied my phone, wedged between the passenger seat and the console. I scrabbled for it, then called 911 but got no response. I must be out of range. I called my husband. No answer. Why would I get an answer from him if 911 didn't answer? I didn't know. Didn't care. I kept calling. Kept getting no answer. An hour passed. 2. I was so cold. The phone battery was draining. My fingers were numb and thick with cold. My nose was an icicle. I could feel my body shutting down, trying to protect the core. Ice inside the car. Ice inside my body. The phone battery is red. I dial 911 again without hope. And then I hear, the glory of glories, 911, what's your emergency? I nearly sobbed as I stammered out of my predicament. The young woman on the line was bright, calm, and reassuring. A wave of relief washed over me. Then she exclaimed cheerfully, "Oh, Mrs. Nelson. Beth Nelson. This is Jessie Baxter. You remember me, don't you? Well, don't you worry, Beth, we're coming for you." I closed my eyes and moaned. Jessie Baxter. The mother I had lost. For the last time, could you lower the volume of your phone? That's what the man sitting in the seat in front of mine said to me as I was riding the bus home, chatting with a friend on speakerphone so I could hear her better. Look, no one else is complaining but you. See, they are all staring out the window, or playing with their phones. Couldn't you do what everyone else does and listen to some music? The look he gave me in return sent a chill down my spine, but I wasn't going to him get to me. I continued my conversation despite the man's insistent glances. As I stood up to get off at my stop, the man addressed me one last time. "Miss, you've forgotten your bag." Indeed, he held it in his hand, and was handing it to me. "Thank you," I said, taking it. "If you want to thank me, please turn down the volume on your phone on your way out." I nodded discreetly, then got off the bus. The evening had gone by in a flash. Shortly after turning off all the lights and going to bed, I heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps treading on glass. Someone was breaking into my house. Adrenaline rushed through my body, and I instantly threw my hand inside my bag at the foot of my bed where I'd left it the night before, looking for my phone. I emptied the contents onto the floor in a hurry. I finally got my hands on it, and just as I was about to call the police, a ray of light from the full moon illuminated an unfamiliar object on the floor. It was round, the size of a large coin, with a reflective surface and a logo in the middle. At the same time, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I ran out of my room, leaving the light on to bait him and hide in one of the other 3 rooms upstairs. Hiding just behind one of the doors, I hatched a plan with my phone in hand. The intruder started walking slowly towards my room. At the same time, I finished typing 911 and pressed the call button. That's when the world froze. The call was instantly answered by an operator, and my phone, still set on speaker at full volume, screamed, "911, what's your emergency?" The door in front of me slowly opened, and I saw with horror the man from the bus in front of me holding a large knife. "I told you to turn your phone down."
Family matters. As a forensic investigator, I've come to see some truly gruesome acts. Even still, nothing prepared me for what happened. I'd been the chief investigator on a string of difficult-to-solve homicides. We were tracking a serial killer that did not leave behind anything we could use to find them. The killings didn't follow any particular pattern. Things went from bad to worse when the only suspect that seemed to make sense wound up dead in a car accident. But the killings didn't stop. Then, it happened. For some reason the pattern changed. On my front door. "You're next." Though it was uncharacteristic for the killer, we had to treat this as credible. My high schooler son was away at band camp, so his safety was in check until he got home. We had a pair of plainclothes keeping an eye on my wife at all times. I don't remember falling asleep, my sleep had been fitful. What I do know is that I woke up to a frantic heavy pounding at my door. The large volume of flashing squad car lights outside didn't help. Apparently, the killer must have been watching for me to fall asleep, because as soon as I did they snuck in, abducted my wife, and snuck her into the old storm shelter out back that we hadn't used in over a decade. Somehow they did this without the plainclothes seeing it. A very crafty and truly sick individual. My colleagues wouldn't let me go into the storm shelter. I don't know why I couldn't hear her screaming. Odds are she was drugged. I trust my colleagues implicitly. But, once again, they didn't find anything left behind to give us any leads. Sleep escaped me entirely, so I decided to go out to the storm shelter to see if I could find anything. Outside of where I presumed my wife's body had been found, everything else looked exactly as I remembered it. I scoured the room more carefully than I ever had before at any other crime scene. The terror of not knowing was driving me to near madness. Then I saw it. I don't know how it even caught my attention. An eyelash, one single eyelash, sitting in the corner of the small shelter space. As soon as the DNA came back, I was mortified. But the evidence was sitting right there in front of me. My son was now certainly at risk. He seemed extremely startled to see me as I was peeling into the parking lot after breaking every traffic law. "Dad, what's up?" His shaky voice betrayed him. It was clear that he knew what I knew. I hadn't told him about his mom yet, I hadn't figured out how to give him that news. But he already knew. "Son, if you're going to follow in the footsteps of your father, you really have to learn how to clean up after yourself better. Everyone here has to take an IQ test." I almost failed. My hand was shaking, I scribbled the page, trying to circle a solution. My vision blurred at the strange collection of shapes and lines on the page. The rapid ticking of the clock was a snare drummer in the silence of the room. I read the timer beside me, 10 minutes remained. My brain felt wrapped in thick dense fog. The patterns in front of me taunted me. Was there even a solution to these problems? 5 minutes, the administrator said emotionless. 5 minutes. There was no way I would finish. I began rapidly selecting answers at random. Tears were pooling in my eyes, I was getting hot with embarrassment. All I could do was leave it to chance. Time, the stern woman said, marching to my desk, snatching the test. Please, let me do it again. I have a headache. I'm not defunct. I play music. I write poetry. My voice was shaking, tears running down my cheeks. Silence, the woman barked as she scanned over the paper. I watched in horror as she pulled the cap off of the red marking pen, putting ink to page. I recoiled, I was trembling now. Again. No. I couldn't help but yell. I said silence, she swatted her desk in anger. I looked at the others around the room, their heads hung, staring at their desks. Why do you have to? I felt a hand on my shoulder. He looked at me, his expression pained. Shoo. The teacher was glaring now, but continued. Another. I began to sob, I wasn't going to make it. Any second now she would make the final marks on the page and I would be done for. She scoffed in disgust. 75, just barely a pass, get out of my sight. I was dumbstruck, I stood up, almost falling to the floor. I gasped as I walked out of the building into the fresh air. I sat down and continued sobbing. Somehow I had made it. I passed. I watched horrified as a black truck pulled in front of the building. Suddenly I heard desperate screams from inside. Please no. Please no. There was a mistake. My hand slipped, his voice strained. It was the one who had set his hand on my shoulder. Two men in black uniforms carried him out as another opened the door to truck and threw him in. How many would fail the test? Nobody knew what happened to those sent to Dimspark. The rumor was it was a mining facility. Others said they became test subjects. I just know they were never seen again. I didn't want to think about it. 18 years of worry resolved, I now knew my place, a 75%er. I would probably end up in the kitchens or warehouses. I thought about my younger friends who would take the assessment next year. They would make it? I couldn't question it, I just had to do my assigned task. The cycle would continue.